Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghoul Dude, and today we're continuing our Digging Up the Past of Dragon series with Origins, and we're going to see where all of these are going to take us. But a little side note, this is close to where I started playing, so I'm very familiar with these more so than I was with the earlier dragons. So this is where I can actually like really get in depth and on my knowledge of the dragons from here. So starting it off with back in Origins, we have the Avaricious Dragon for 2 and 2 red. It's a 4/4 with flying. At the beginning of your draw step, you draw an additional card. At the beginning of your end step, you discard your hand. Now this may seem like one of those lackluster type dragons, but if you're playing with a dragon commander that brings them back, then this is not all bad at all. And if you're playing, more permanents than spells, then it really doesn't matter. Especially if you're playing with a commander that isn't dragon focused, but it is, creature focused like Nikia of the Law of the Old Ways. You have double mana, so you're just going to be able to cast those creatures. And I love how the flavor text goes along with what I'm saying. Waste follows want. So if you don't want it that bad enough, you're going to end up wasting it. So now we're moving into Battle for Zendikar with Akum Hellkite for 4 and 2 red. It's a 4/4 with flying and the landfall ability, which was very common in this set. But whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and if that land is a mountain, it deals 2 damage to that creature or player instead. And as I'm making these Digging Up the Past videos of dragons, I'm really starting to put together a list in my head of dragons that I want to add to a deck to, just to as I want to build it, the more I'm dealing with it. So now we go into Oath of the Gatewatch, and we run into a Tyrant of Valakut for 5 generic mana, 2 red. It's a 5/4 with Surge, so if you cast another spell, it costs one less. It costs the Surge cost, and it has flying. When it enters the battlefield, if the Surge cost was paid, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. It's just a bolt, pretty much. So if you bolt, like say you played a lightning bolt, and then you paid the Surge cost, you deal another lightning bolt. It's actually pretty kind of funny. But it's also fun to note that Valakut, the land Valakut, deals 3 damage. So it's kind of flavorful in a way. Kind of wanted to throw back to that. So now we move into Eldritch Moon. Shadows of Innistrad did not have any dragons that we could look back on. So we're just going to skip ahead to Eldritch Moon with Mirrorwing Dragon. And for 3 and 2 red, it's a 4/5. And whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Mirrorwing Dragon, that player copies. Excuse me, I am like super tired. I'm drained. That player copies that spell for each other creature he or she controls that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So basically, if you play a Brute Strength on your dragons and you're playing a dragon deck, guess what? If you cast Brute Strength on the Mirrorwing, all of your dragons get a Brute Strength. And then it's just all of your creatures. Yeah, so it's kind of like a Raga Draga, but it's for you, and it's whatever. So if a removal spell targets your creature, that's actually important to notice. If a removal spell targets your creature, it targets all of their creatures, which is actually really cool. It's board protection in a way, except for board wipes. So now we're going to move into Kaladesh with the Sky Ship Stalker for 2 and 2 red. It's a 3/3 with flying, and it has 3 abilities. For a single red, it gets +1/+0 until a turn. For a red, it gains First Strike, and for a red, it gains haste until end of turn. So for 5 mana, you can make it hasty. For 5 mana, you can make it a First Strike with for 6 mana, you can make a First Strike with haste, etc., etc. And then we move into Aether Revolt, which I was actually kind of surprised. I do not remember any dragons in Aether Revolt or in the Kaladesh block, but I'm so glad to see them because, it makes for more content. But here we have the Free Gem Regent for 4 generic and 2 red. It's a 4/4 with Improvise, so your artifacts can tap to reduce the casting cost. And it has flying, then for 2 mana it gets +2/+0 until a turn, which is actually pretty cool. And now we move into Amonkhet, one of my favorite sets. And then we get in, and then we find ourselves face to face with probably one of the most powerful cards from Amonkhet, Glorybringer. Whether it was in Standard, it was in Modern, for the longest time, this was a beater. You had to be afraid of the flying 5 mana 4/4 with haste. And because it just did so much work when it came in. I remember playing against this in Standard, and I was so scared because zombies get wrecked by 4 damage most of the time. It doesn't matter. Unless you had like 3 lords out there, most of your tutus were dying instantly as soon as this came down. Or your lord was dying. So, I mean, for me, this was the boogeyman for me because, hey, you really can't just do too much against 4 damage directly to wherever they want it to go. And then we're going to move into Dominaria. This is where we're going to start seeing your more prominent reprints, or the more, I don't know how you want to call it, but they're redoing of some of their older dragons. What did the comics call them? I can't remember what the comics call it when they redo a character. But they're bringing back older characters. Starting off with the Varix Bladewing. And I believe we've seen almost all of the brothers, the Bladewing brothers. But we haven't seen Varix up to this point. But Varix is a 2 generic, 2 red, 4/4 with kicker for 3 generic mana. And it has flying. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create a Carix Bladewing, a 4/4 legendary red dragon creature token with flying. So for what, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana, you get 8 power. It's not bad. You break even. And then we have Darigaz Reincarnated. I think that's how you say it. For 4 generic, a black, a red, and a green, and it's a 7/7 with flying, trample, and haste. All it needs is death touch, and it's a threat. It's a super threat. And it says if Darigaz would die, instead exile it with 3 egg counters on it. And it is exiled. It is outside. So I don't know if your opponent could like interfere with that, like add proliferate, because it is exiled. But at the beginning of your upkeep, if it is exiled with an egg counter on it, remove an egg counter from it. Then if it has no egg counters on it, return it to the battlefield. That is only if it would die. If it's exiled, you don't get anything. You got to recast it from the command zone. And now we're going to move into one of the ones I really wanted to talk about, M19. Starting off with Spark Tongue Dragon for 3 generic and 2 red. It's a 3/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a red. When you do, it deals 3 damage to any target. So you're just paying 5 mana and 3 mana for a lightning strike. A more expensive lightning strike. I can't remember what the 3 mana alternative was for that. And then we get a very, very new card, and I believe this was in the Planeswalker deck, Sarkhan's Whelp, or maybe they had it in the set. I can't remember. It's been a while. But for 2 generic and a red, it's a 2/2 with flying. When you activate an ability of a Sarkhan Planeswalker, Sarkhan's Whelp deals 1 damage to any target. That's actually pretty cool. Demanding Dragon for 3 generic and 2 red. It's a 5/5 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature, which is pretty devastating if you're playing with like blink effects or something, and you just blink it back and forth, and it's great. And I love the art matches the flavor text so well. It says a knight's devotion to their steed only goes only so far. That poor little horse is just going for a ride that it's never going to come back from. And here we have Lathlis, the Dragon Queen. For 4 generic and 2 red, it's a 6/6 with flying. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. And then she has the ability for a generic and a red. Dragons you control get +1/+0 to a turn. This one right here, this will probably be what my mono red dragon deck. And yes, I've decided to go mono red. I didn't want to go multicolor because I have a list. I'm doing like the 32 deck challenge, but I'm really not. I'm just trying to iron out the decks that I want to play in certain colors. And I think Lathlis is going to be my tribal dragon and commander, because all of my monocolor decks are, so far they're all like tribal. Colorless is Traxos, white is Angels with Giada, blue is Spirits with Orvar. Yeah, that's a deck. Black is Gisa with Zombies, of course. I do not have a red deck. I had a couple red decks. I have a Godo built, like a older Godo CEDH deck built. It doesn't have all the power cards in it because they're, elsewhere, but that's what I have. And it was Captain Ripley Vance, and it was a meme deck because everybody called me Ripley in one of my play groups, so that it is what it is. But I think Lathlis is going to end up being my mainstay red deck until I find something new and shiny, as they say. And then we run into a Bone Dragon for 3 generic and 2 black. It's a 5/4 with flying, and it has the ability for 3 and 2 black. You can exile 7 other cards from your graveyard and return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And I did see some list a long time ago that were running the Bone Dragon in a deck, which is actually kind of wild for me because I think it was a zombie deck that was running it. Here we roll into the more notable characters of Magic's history. All of the elder dragons of old, with their new abilities and cards and everything, and it's just so wonderful to me. I love looking at these and knowing that they reference something to me of history and Magic. And we're going to start off with Arcades the Strategist for 1 generic, a green, a white, and a blue, and it's a 3/5 with flying and vigilance. Whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. There are many names for this one, and the one that I hear the most in one of my play groups is this: Arcades the Strategist gets called out, that is Senior Butt Fight. I don't know why they went with that one. They could have said, anything else, but Senior Butt Fight is what stuck in my play group. Moving on to Chromium the Mutable. For 4 generic, a white, a blue, and a black, it's a 7/7 with flash, and this spell can't be countered, and flying. It also has the ability to discard a card until end of turn, and it becomes a human with base power toughness 1/1, loses all abilities and gains hexproof, and it can't be blocked this turn. This, in my opinion, is really, really flavorful to the story that I know. And it may not be, the full fleshed out story, but Chromium became human to kill another Elder Dragon that we know and use this form to lessen himself to be able to catch the dragon off guard and do all kinds of other stuff while he was human, which I think is very cool. And here we have Nicol Bolas the Ravager, This one is a flip card. If you weren't playing then, it's a flip card that they were testing out, and this is the front side. So we have for one generic a blue or black and a red. It's a 4/4 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. This is still a great commander for like discard decks and everything, and it's a planeswalker on the back, so you really can't do you can't say too much against it. But the commander has this as a commander has really good utility with discard spells, because the second ability for 4, a blue or a black and a red, allows you to transform him at sorcery speed into Nicol Bolas the Arisen. So this is him after he got his spark. This is him before he got his spark. So the Planeswalker ability, he starts out at 7. He gets a +2, draw 2 cards. His -3 is deal 10 damage to target creature or player. His -4 is put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, which goes great with that discard. And then -12 is exile all but the bottom card of target opponent's library. That is nutty. Ooh, that's wild. Yeah, this is a menace. Now we're moving on to Palladium Moors, the Ruiner, for 3 generic, a red, a green, and a white. It's a 6/6 with flying, vigilance, and trample. And it has hexproof if it hasn't dealt damage yet. So you could, I wonder if there's a way to beat around that, like if it hasn't dealt damage. So if you could find something to like redirect the damage that it would do, that would actually be pretty cool. Let me know down in the comments below if there's a way to keep it, for it to keep its hexproof, but still be able to land damage. Like, it wouldn't be commander damage, of course, because it has to deal combat damage. But be a great way to find a workaround for that. I might actually build a deck to find a workaround for that. Vevictus Asmodi the Dire for 3 generic, a black, a red, and a green. It's a 6/6 with flying. Whenever it attacks, for each player, choose target permanent the player controls. Those players sacrifice those permanents. Sacrifice. Each player who sacrificed a permanent this way reveals the top card of their library and puts it into the battlefield if it's a permanent card. Now what you do is you find a way to keep them from putting anything in because they couldn't cast it, and it was like, this would be great with a white pip in it, where you could play the Containment Priest. If it wasn't cast, it's exiled. But I digress. Now we move into Guilds of Ravnica, where we get to see the Hellkite Whelp. It's a little bitty dragon. For 4 and a red, it's a 3/3 with flying. Whenever it attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature defending player controls. But if they don't have any, it's just a dead. It's a 3/3 with flying. And then here we get our newest rendition at this time of Niv Mizzet Parun for 3 blue and 3 red, no generic. You get what you got, and you do it. You do the thing. You pay 6 mana for a 5/5. But it can't be countered, and it has flying. Whenever you draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target. Yeah, this is just a curiosity killer. With this and curiosity, it just goes. If you didn't know, there's a combo with this and a card called Curiosity. And it says whenever a creature deals a damage, you draw a card. So you draw the first card, it deals a damage. You draw a card from Curiosity, it deals a damage. Niv Mizzet deals a damage. And it's a thing forever. But it also has the ability, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. This card sees CEDH could play as a commander, if you didn't know, and now you do. And it is so horrible to see this go off on like turn 3, and it's like you're still sitting there like, I still haven't done anything. Yeah, because if you don't remove this and a person plays the Curiosity, if you don't counter it or remove Niv Mizzet, you're just stuck. Now we're going to move into Ravnica Allegiance, and we see the Skarrgan Hellkite. For 3 generic and 2 red, it's a 4/4 with Riot. That's wild. and it has flying. And for 3 generic and a red, it deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Activate this ability only if it has a +1/+1 counter on it. So for 5 mana, you can have a 5/5, and then it gets the ability. I'd figure you'd want to have like the downside. Then if it didn't get the counter, you would get the ability. I don't know. I don't know how I would have worded this, but that's still pretty cool that you can deal 2 damage for 4 mana, even though it's not that great. And finally, we're going to roll into War of the Spark, and we're going to see another rendition of Niv Mizzet with Niv Mizzet Reborn. For WUBRG, you get a 6/6 legendary creature dragon avatar with flying. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. So when they mean color pairs, they want to think about I want you to think about the guilds. So Golgari is green and black, Azorius is white and blue, Boros is white and red, and you have to choose from among those. You have 10 cards, you reveal the top 10, and you get to choose some of the guilds. But you can't choose more than one. So you have to choose for each color pair. So you get a Assassin's Trophy, you get a Boros Legionnaire, you get a, I don't know, a bunch of other cards. You get a Dovin's Veto and all that other stuff from that pile. And you put those into your hand, you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I knew there's a guy in one of my play groups in a different city, and he built this deck, and it was horrific to play against because you never knew what he was gonna reveal into, and that was just gonna cause so much trouble. But that is gonna be it for today, everybody. I really appreciate everybody that has watched this long, and I just can't tell y'all how much I appreciate y'all, because y'all are the only reason why I keep doing what I'm doing, besides the fact that I just like doing it. I started with zombies, and it's just been going from there, just making content. And I still enjoy it. I still like it. You know, sometimes it's oh man, I didn't get the time this weekend to put time into recording. But you know, when you like doing what you do, I still enjoy it. You still take time to enjoy it, and I still enjoy putting these videos together, coming up with thumbnails and everything, and talking to you guys. And it does a lot for me, and I can't tell you how much that it has made a difference in my mental state. But until the next video, I will see you guys in the graveyard.